How good was Megatron actually?
Firing for the end zone. It is caught. Touchdown.
How does a receiver become so dominant that defenses have to double or even triple team him, yet he still manages to break records?
Calvin Johnson reaches out and makes the catch.
That was Calvin Johnson style. Known as Megatron, he wasn't just a great wide receiver, but also a physical phenomenon who changed how the game is played.
And throws.
With his unmatched size, speed, and strength, he could outjump defenders, outrun coverage, and redefine
Here is Calvin Johnson. He's going.
what it means to be unstoppable. But was he really as good as the legends say? Be the judge. The making of a legend. Calvin Johnson's story begins long before the bright lights of the NFL stadiums back in Tyrone, Georgia, where a quiet, hard-working kid showed signs of extraordinary talent. From a young age, Johnson stood out, not just for his height. He was already towering over his peers by middle school, but for his love of the game and his relentless work ethic. By the time he reached Sandy Creek High School, coaches and scouts were already taking notice. His high school performance was nothing short of electrifying. Johnson excelled in multiple sports, but football was where he shined the brightest. He could leap over defenders with ease, his hands seemed to pull footballs out of the sky, and his speed could break open any game. With such rare athletic gifts, he quickly became one of the most coveted recruits in the country, catching the attention of major college programs across the nation. He then chose Georgia Tech, where his incredible potential began to unfold fully. As a Yellow Jacket, Johnson was nearly unstoppable.
Ball, time, fade route. Johnson brings it in. Touchdown, Calvin Johnson. 25 yards. What a play in traffic.
And if you can jump.
His combination of speed, size, and skill turned him into a nightmare for defensive backs in the ACC. In his 3 seasons at Georgia Tech, he racked up over 2,900 receiving yards and 28 touchdowns, setting multiple school records and winning the Biletnikoff Award as the nation's top receiver in 2006. But it wasn't just the numbers that made people pay attention. It was the way he played the game. With a unique blend of grace and power, effortlessly stretching the field on deep routes or snatching contested catches out of the hands of defenders. By the time the 2007 NFL Draft came around, Calvin Johnson was the talk of the league. The Detroit Lions had the 2nd overall pick, and they knew they couldn't pass on a generational talent like Johnson. And so, Calvin Johnson stepped onto the biggest stage in professional football. Expectations were high, but no one could have predicted just how much Megatron would change the game. Dominance on the field. From the moment he stepped onto the field in his rookie season, Johnson showed glimpses of his potential, but it was in the years that followed that he truly left his mark. By his 3rd season, Johnson had already established himself as one of the most dangerous receivers in the league, combining big playability with game-changing consistency. One of the most unforgettable performances came in 2012, when Johnson set the NFL single-season record for receiving yards with an astounding 1,964 yards.
Receiver looking for the right side of the end zone. It is caught. Calvin Johnson for the touchdown from 25 yards out.
Game after game, he tore through defenses, racking up yardage like few had ever seen before. Even when the Lions struggled as a team, Johnson found ways to dominate, consistently putting up numbers that turned heads and dropped jaws. And it wasn't just in 1 or 2 games. He had 11 games with over 100 receiving yards that season, including a stretch of 8 consecutive games where he crossed the century mark. No matter who lined up against him, Johnson seemed to find a way to win. Defensive backs who were usually reliable found themselves overmatched, and even the league's best corners had their hands full trying to contain him. In one game against the Dallas Cowboys, he racked up 329 receiving yards, the 2nd most in a single game in NFL history, proving that he could take over a game like few others could. What truly defined his dominance was how he excelled under pressure. On 3rd downs, in the red zone, or when the team needed a big play, Johnson was the go-to guy. He made clutch catches in double or even triple coverage, fought for every yard after the catch, and turned contested balls into highlight reels. Teams knew he was coming, defenses were set up to stop him, yet week after week, he found ways to shine. It wasn't uncommon to see 2, sometimes 3 defenders focused entirely on him. Cornerbacks would press him at the line, safeties would shade over to his side, and linebackers would drop back in coverage just to clog up his passing lanes. Even then, he often found a way to make plays. Teams would leave other receivers wide open, gamble with the run defense, or even go for more exotic coverages just to have a shot at keeping Johnson in check. Even with every defense game planning against him, Johnson led the NFL in receiving yards in both 2011 and 2012, making him the clear choice for All-Pro honors. His impact went beyond the stats. It was his presence on the field that often forced defenses to adapt, change their schemes, and sometimes even abandon their usual strategies. He redefined what was possible at the wide receiver position, and not just in any way, as he was special. Let me break it down. Unique skill set. Calvin Johnson wasn't your typical wide receiver. He was a rare athletic marvel who redefined the position with his sheer physical presence. Standing 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighing around 237 pounds, he was built like a tight end but had the speed of a sprinter. At the NFL Combine, Johnson clocked an astonishing 4.35 seconds in the 40-yard dash, a time that rivaled some of the fastest players in the league regardless of size. This combination of size and speed made him a mismatch for any defender, whether they were a nimble cornerback or a physical safety. What really set him apart, though, was his catch radius. Johnson's wingspan and leaping ability allowed him to grab passes that most receivers couldn't even dream of reaching. Whether it was a ball thrown too high or too wide, Calvin had a way of stretching out and pulling it in, making the impossible look routine. His large, powerful hands were known for securing the football in traffic, and he could hold on to catches even in the face of bone-crushing hits from defenders. On top of that, Johnson was an expert at high-pointing the ball, leaping at just the right moment to snatch passes out of the air before defenders could react. This skill made him a lethal threat on deep throws and jump balls, a key weapon for any quarterback looking to make big plays down the field. He could run precise routes, creating separation against even the most elite defenders, and his quick acceleration off the line of scrimmage often left defensive backs trailing behind, scrambling to keep up. Yet, Calvin wasn't just a straight-line runner. Guess what? He could change direction with remarkable agility, making sharp cuts that left defenders guessing. His versatility on the field meant he could play anywhere, outside, in the slot, or even come in as a blocker. Opponents didn't know whether to cover him close to the line or drop back and hope to contain him deep. His unique skill set forced coaches to rethink their defensive schemes, often requiring multiple players to account for his presence on every play. With every snap, Johnson proved he wasn't just another receiver. He was an extraordinary talent who could do things that hadn't been seen before. Like, for instance, in his 2015 season, he delivered one masterclass we can never forget, proving he was still one of the NFL's most dominant receivers. Even as whispers of retirement swirled, Johnson put up an incredible 1,214 receiving yards, the most by any player in their final season in NFL history. And with 88 receptions, he ranked second all-time for catches in a player's last year. But at just 30 years old, with plenty of gas left in the tank and a resume that was still building, he chose to walk away from the game he loved.
Whole season thinking about how I was going to tell him I was going to retire.
The decision to retire early. For many fans and analysts, it felt like an ending that came too soon, but for Johnson, it was a decision rooted in personal and professional realities. Johnson had been battling injuries for much of his career. His knees, fingers, and ankles had all taken a beating from years of playing at an elite level. The constant pain, the rigorous recovery process, and the knowledge that every game could mean another injury began to weigh heavily on him. He often played through the pain that would sideline most players, showing up week after week, doing whatever he could for his team. But over time, the physical toll started to add up, and he began to see a different future for himself. One where he could enjoy life after football without constant pain or debilitating injuries. Another factor in his decision was the state of the Detroit Lions. Despite his incredible performances, the team had struggled to find consistent success. Johnson had endured years of rebuilding, coaching changes, and a lack of postseason appearances. Despite his best efforts, the Lions never truly became contenders. The grind of losing seasons and the lack of a clear path to a championship wore on him. In interviews, he spoke about the difficulty of giving everything he had, physically and mentally, to a team that couldn't seem to turn the corner. By choosing to retire early, Calvin may have shortened his career, but he left the game with his head held high, knowing that he gave it everything he had. He will always be remembered as one of the best to ever do it, a true legend who changed the game forever. So, knowing all this, here's the big question. If he had played longer, could he have become the undisputed greatest wide receiver in NFL history? Or did his early exit add even more to the legend that surrounds him today? Let us know what you think in the comments section below as you leave a like for the video. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one. Also, don't forget to watch this video on the top 5 worst teams in NFL history. You'll love it.